Discover the amazing power of your actions, 7 incredible steps to transform your destiny forever. Emily Larson stood by her classroom window, watching the flurries drift lazily down, each snowflake a delicate embodiment of promise and potential. Yet, as she turned back to the classroom, the reality weighed heavily on her. Here, in the small Midwestern town that had been her home and her workplace, she felt increasingly invisible. The memories of her days teaching science, of budding curiosity in her students' eyes, collided with the stark indifference of faculty meetings where innovation was suffocated by conformity. Emily's heart ached with the knowledge that many of her students faced daily challenges in their lives: economically strapped families, broken dreams, and silence that stifled their ambitions. A fire flickered in her, one tempered by doubt. What could she do with the underfunded classrooms? How could she refuse to let the system define her students' futures? These thoughts gnawed at her, her stomach tightening at the idea of being merely a cog in an obsolete machine. It was a conflict she felt deeply. On one hand, she was committed to her students, vowing to inspire them despite the hardships that loomed beyond school walls. On the other, the crushing weight of feeling overlooked drained her energy and confidence. As she sat in her cramped living room later that evening, Emily often replayed the same refrain in her mind: was she dreaming too big? Her grandfather, a celebrated scientist in his youth, had long passed, leaving her nothing but a family name and a fading legacy. What good was that legacy if no one remembered? Flipping through endless lessons and exercises, she fought against the rising tide of despair, purpose battling the whispers of self-doubt. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The next morning, while organizing the attic, Emily's hand brushed against something coarse and familiar: the dusty leather of her grandfather's journal. It felt out of place, a relic of a time long rendered quiet. As she leafed through its pages, a shocking revelation struck her. Within those lines lay the remnants of groundbreaking research overshadowed by a scandal her family had been unable to face. Tension coiled within her, excitement over understanding her grandfather's work clashing with a chilling realization of the implications. How could she present this revelation without scorn from both faculty and students? Her stomach turned, aware of the institutional barriers waiting in ambush. A heavy weight settled on her chest, and she wrestled with the fear of failure, the very emotions she sought to banish while igniting hope in her students. Would revisiting her grandfather's legacy change anything for them? What if she failed? As the pressures of expectations built, the urgency to honor his work turned into a swirling storm within her. She could feel the school institution, cold and unyielding, looming like a giant shadow ready to extinguish her spark before it ignited. Emily, the echo of her thoughts darkened. What if no one listens? What if you're not enough? Morning light seeped through the thin curtains of Emily's bedroom, cutting through the remnants of a night spent wrestling with her thoughts. Today was different. A new resolve catalyzed by the journal's secrets ignited an unexpected fierceness within her. The familiar walls of her home, once stifling, transformed into a sanctuary of possibilities. She contemplated her grandfather's legacy not as a burden but as a springboard, an opportunity to challenge the educational norms that threatened to snuff out her students' dreams. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, the reflection staring back at her, revealing not just weariness but a flicker of determination she hadn't felt before. Today, she would confront the unwritten expectations of her role. "You're going to do this," she whispered to herself. Arriving at school, the frigid air matched the daunting atmosphere inside the faculty lounge. Dread pooled in her stomach as she recalled the often stagnant conversations about funding shortages and curriculum compliance. Yet, in the echo of familiar voices discussing policy changes, she felt an undercurrent of potential. Sipping her coffee, Emily started sketching a plan. If she could just demonstrate how her grandfather's research could invigorate the curriculum, bolster engagement, and make science accessible to her students, perhaps the faculty would rally. Her heart pounded at the thought of presenting. What will they think of my ideas? A dark whisper tugged at her. Yet she silenced it, replacing doubt with an unfolding strategy. She would gather data from her students on their interests and determine how her grandfather's work could relate to their realities. This wasn't just about her legacy anymore, it was about creating a narrative that could inspire her classroom. The first bell rang, jolting her from thought. Her students entered, eking energy from their youthful exuberance as they shuffled into their seats. Emily looked at them, her vibrant young people battling against the odds, and felt invigorated by their presence. Today, we'll explore something different, she announced, her voice steadier than she felt. Let me show you the work of a pretty incredible scientist, my grandfather. As she shared the passionate segments of his work, the room buzzed with curiosity. Questions ignited like firecrackers, their faces lit up, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her doubts start to lift. Each inquisitive glance and raised hand felt like validation that her message was resonating. She felt a connection, a bridge forming between her past and their futures, uniting them regardless of invisible barriers. Even after the classroom emptied, the energy lingered. Emily wasn't just another teacher, she was an activist in her own right, pushing against a sluggish status quo. As she cleared the desk, her thoughts turned toward the faculty meeting scheduled for later that week. With every heartbeat, a plan solidified in her mind. Presenting her findings to the faculty was now an imperative, not just for her career but for her students' futures. But as she returned home that evening, new doubts shadowed her. Could a simple presentation shift the rigid mindset of the faculty? Would they really value the insights she had to offer? The questions roiled, tugging at her newfound confidence in a tug-of-war with fear that reminded her of the stakes. Driven but disturbed by uncertainty, Emily stared at her grandfather's journal once more, the enigmatic sentences tempting her to dive deeper into the legacy she had begun to unravel. What other secrets lay hidden beneath the surface? The fire that had sparked earlier burned brighter, igniting an urgency to uncover their potential. She wouldn't just fight to have her voice heard. Tomorrow was a new opportunity for action, and she would seize it with unwavering spirit. The time had come to face the resistance of the faculty head-on. But would her courage resonate, or would it fall flat in the face of skepticism? Emily stared at the flickering screen on her laptop, the looming deadline pressing against her. It wasn't just about completing a presentation, it was about crafting a narrative that could sweep through the faculty like a gust of fresh air, invigorating and disorienting. She could feel an alarm bell ringing in the depths of her mind, each pang urging her to pour more of her passion into this effort. The initial excitement of sharing her grandfather's findings began to morph into a tightening knot of anxiety. She had always been diligent and well-prepared, but this was different. This was her chance to awaken the spirits of her colleagues, to shed light on the benefits of a more dynamic, engaging curriculum. Yet she wrestled with the fact that the faculty had grown accustomed to the mundane ebb and flow of educational standards. Would her fervor even register on their radar? With a deep breath, she pushed aside distractions and began rearranging her presentation. The goal was clear, not just to convey information, but to stoke the fires of curiosity and critical thinking. She crafted anecdotes from her grandfather's life, illustrating how his revolutionary approach had once stirred excitement in a classroom not much different from her own. They needed to experience the energy of scientific discovery, instead of resigning to the monotony of standardized tests. As the clock ticked against her, her mind drifted back to the students' faces earlier that day, their innocent awe at science, the rapid questions they hurled at her. A rush of warmth enveloped her. After all, they were the reason she felt this urgency. If she could ignite that same passion within her colleagues, they might just grasp the vital role they could play in reshaping education. Emily pored over her grandfather's notes that night as if they were sacred texts, searching for that hidden gem of wisdom that would electrify her presentation. Between the lines, she found stories of resilience, challenges met with creativity, and lessons learned through failures. Each detail brought her closer to understanding not just her grandfather's legacy but also her own purpose. In the quiet hum of her room, the reality began to crystallize. she was not merely a vessel of her grandfather's knowledge, she was a catalyst, acting in defense of her students' futures. With a newfound clarity, Emily decided her presentation would start and end with her students. As she tucked away the scientific jargon, her thoughts shifted to crafting a compelling narrative, one that would place her students front and center. Yet, as she prepared, another wave of doubt surged. She recalled the faculty's entrenched skepticism, the dismissive looks she had often brushed off. The fear clawed at her again, a dark shadow whispering that her efforts were futile. Did she truly possess the authority to challenge long-standing practices? The weight of potential rejection hung heavy in the air like an unwelcome fog. Determined to drown out the discouragement, Emily rose from her desk and began pacing. She envisioned standing in front of her colleagues, armed with not only data but stories that breathed life into numbers. Every statistic was a testament to young minds yearning for more than the suffocating stasis of traditional teaching methods. The night deepened, and every ounce of her being called for decisiveness. Emily would confront the very barriers that threatened her students. She would not falter in the face of apathy. With the moon casting shadows through her window, Emily smirked at the rising tension within her. Tomorrow's meeting would not be simply a presentation, it was a summons for change that they could either embrace or resist, but deep down, she knew a storm lurked, one that could either destroy the foundations of her confidence or reinforce her mission like weathered wood. If she stumbled, if the faculty rejected her earnest plea for transformation, could she still muster the strength to rise and challenge them again? The morning would come too quickly, but the day promised fire. Would she ignite the flames of inspiration or merely kindle a dying ember in the hearts of her colleagues? The question echoed, leaving her anxious for what lay ahead. Emily awoke to the soft, gray light of dawn filtering through her curtains, a stark contrast to the storm swirling within. The lingering doubts from the previous night clung like cobwebs in her mind. She wished she could simply erase that internal monologue questioning her capability. However, with every tick of the clock, her urgency swelled. Today wasn't just about her presentation, it was about empowerment, about scaffolding the futures of her students. After a quick, unsettled breakfast, Emily found herself in front of the mirror. She focused on her reflection, speaking softly to the girl staring back at her. You can do this. You're not just sharing your grandfather's research, you're advocating for your students. Remember their faces, the fire in their eyes. Let that drive you. Her voice trembled, sounding wholly insufficient against the weight of uncertainty. But she was more than the doubts that pestered her, she had skills and resilience developed over years of effort. Arriving at school, the air seemed charged, each hallway teeming with others as they moved about, unaware of the quiet battle raging inside her heart. She had rehearsed her presentation countless times in her mind, but nothing felt remotely adequate. Peeking into the staff lounge, she spotted a few familiar faces. Some were already gathered in clusters, animatedly discussing yesterday's events, while others scrolled through their phones, indifferent. Emily couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. She chose instead to focus on the task at hand, pulling out her notes. This wasn't about impressing her colleagues with data alone, it was about persuasion and emotion. She needed to find a way to connect with their human side, to reach beyond their skepticism. As she paced the faculty meeting room, Emily contemplated her strategy. She could either provide the safe route and stick to numbers, protocol and decorum, or she could decide to present a narrative intertwined with purpose. What do I truly fear? She whispered to herself. Embarrassment? Rejection? She paused, remembering her students' hungry curiosity, the way they transformed each lesson into vibrant discovery. No fear of hesitation or failure could eclipse that responsibility. As the faculty members filed in, their casual chatter faded to silence. Emily's heart hammered against her chest, echoing like a drum signaling the start of a battle. Gripping her notes, she stood resolutely behind the podium, aware that she was stepping into vulnerability. She recognized this moment would define more than just a single presentation, it would showcase who she was, what she stood for, and how far she was willing to fight against complacency. She opened her mouth, words initially hesitant but slowly gaining strength. Today, I want to talk about passion, she began, locking eyes with a few colleagues, hoping her sincerity was palpable. Passion not only for our subjects but for our students, the very reason we decided to teach in the first place. With that statement, a subtle shift occurred. Some faces started to soften, curiosity igniting. As she blended her grandfather's stories into her own experiences teaching, Emily watched the walls of indifference inch outward. She illustrated challenges, triumphs, and how innovation breathed life into stale lessons. With each anecdote, her confidence burgeoned, transforming vulnerability into a rallying cry for change. However, there was still a lingering tension, a quiet undercurrent of skepticism from a few steadfast faculty members seated at the back. Their expressions remained guarded, unreadable. Emily took a deep breath, reminding herself that even if she made no headway today, she had emerged as a change agent. But what if some refused to even acknowledge her insights? The meeting progressed, and Emily found herself more animated, even hesitant applause blossoming from a few who seemed genuinely intrigued. But the nagging question remained: could she endure the storm of dissent? The prospect of her colleagues' resistance loomed like a specter. As the conclusion approached, she caught sight of the clock behind her, recognizing the need for a strong finish. Let us not shy away from innovation. Let us embrace it, witnessing transformation not just in our classrooms, but in our students' futures. The echoes of her argument floated through the room, and she felt more connected than ever to the mission that had brought her here. Yet, she also sensed a formidable challenge remained. The time had come to face not just her colleagues, but the heart of the educational system she wished to change. With adrenaline pumping, she closed her notes, feeling a dual sense of vulnerability and urgency. Were they ready for the call to action? Would they join her, or would they retreat into comfortable complacency? Each question fired an intensity within her, a moment poised on the brink. As the meeting drew to a close, one hand raised an unknown challenge, a potential adversary, arching like a lightning bolt through the nascent solidarity. Would her resolve hold strong against the impending scrutiny? Emily's heart raced at the sight of the hand raised at the back, the lingering gaze of skepticism staring back at her. The last few minutes of her presentation had been driven by passion and hope, but now doubt crept in, gnawing at her confidence. She braced herself for the question, wondering if this was where her efforts began to unravel. Emily, the voice cut through the room, clear and deliberate. It was Matthew, a senior teacher known for his analytical but often cold approach. While your stories are engaging, how do you expect us to implement these changes practically? New Haven T addressed the logistics. Logistics. The word hung in the air, too heavy. Emily's mind raced, wrapping itself around the core of his challenge. It felt like a challenge to everything she believed in. The fire within her flickered but did not extinguish. She recognized that these moments of confrontation were crucial. They demanded clarity and resolve. I appreciate your question, Matthew, she began, forcing calm into her voice. Change requires more than stories, it requires a tangible framework. She paused, collecting her thoughts. I envision teams collaborating to innovate lesson plans. We can share resources and divide responsibilities, ensuring no one feels overwhelmed. Implementing this isn't about adding more work, it's about enriching what we already do. As she spoke, she noticed some nods from other faculty members, but Matthew remained unconvinced. His narrowed eyes felt like a spotlight on her. Did she dare further challenge his resistance, or would that be a mistake? Another voice broke through the tension. Sarah, a newer teacher intrigued by Emily's fiery resolve. I think what Emily is saying is that we've often relied on tradition that stifles growth. Let us consider a pilot program. Maybe we can test one new method each semester and evaluate the results. Emily seized this moment of support. Exactly. We can start small, gather feedback, and adapt as we go. Each step can lead to broader changes without overwhelming anyone. The weight of their skepticism hadn't dissipated, but now, like a pebble rolling down a hill, Emily felt momentum building. Through this exchange, she was discovering the power of her words, how they could incite dialogue and inspire collaboration, even dissent. Matthew's brow furrowed slightly, perhaps reflecting on the merit of their suggestions. And what happens if the pilot fails? He questioned, playing his role perfectly as the voice of scrutiny. What about our existing students? Fear surged through Emily, a familiar discomfort returned. What if their experiment backfired? What if her students were at stake? Her conviction surged once more as she replied, failure isn't the end, it's a learning opportunity. Our students thrive on challenges. If we foster that spirit in ourselves, they will see the value in resilience, and we will all grow. Isn't that the legacy we want to leave? She could sense Matthew's defenses wavering, and several other faculty members shifted in their seats, eyes now glimmering with interest. The conversation unfolded, sparking further dialogue that Emily hadn't anticipated. The bell rang, a jarring reminder that time was slipping away. As teachers began to stand, Emily felt a rush of mixed emotions: relief for making a case, anxiety over the uncertain next steps. Matthew approached her afterward, an unexpected gesture of solidarity. You made some compelling points, Emily. I'm still apprehensive, but I'll consider what we discussed. Perhaps a joint effort could work, if we're strategic about it. Her chest swelled with unexpected pride. Even if this wasn't an outright victory, it was progress, an initial crack in the wall of resistance. Yet as she packed her materials, preparing to head back to her classroom, a knot of uncertainty remained. What would happen next? Would others rally behind her ideas, or would they merely simmer in the pot of complacency? This was just the beginning, she realized, and the storm of change needed to stir deeper roots. In her thoughts, uncertainty intermingled with hope. Tomorrow's conversations loomed, yet the possibilities felt liberating. Little did she know, the true challenge was yet to surface within her own resolve as she pondered a single looming question: how far was she willing to go to challenge the status quo and become the leader she never envisioned she could be? As Emily entered her classroom the following morning, the sunlight streaming through the windows felt like a spotlight on her inner turmoil. Questions swirled in her mind, mixing with the air of determination that she had garnered during yesterday's meeting. Part of her thrived on the energy of possibility, but another part grappled with the weight of what lay ahead. The moment Matthew had approached her was a small victory, yet she knew that winning hearts and minds would be a greater challenge. The morning passed in a blur of lesson planning and student interactions. Her demeanor exuded confidence as she engaged her students in a lively discussion about literature, but internally, doubts quivered at the edges of her resolve. The idea of fostering collaboration and change among her peers loomed like an unsolved puzzle. With each tick of the clock, the reality that she had initiated a shift hung thickly in the air. Would the teachers embrace her vision, or was she merely building a house of cards poised to collapse? During lunch, she found refuge in the teacher's lounge, her eyes scanning the room filled with familiar faces animatedly exchanging pleasantries. Taking a deep breath, she decided to approach Sarah, who had supported her the day before. If there was strength in numbers, she needed to form connections and build alliances. Hey, Sarah, Emily said, her voice steady but softening as she approached. I appreciated your support yesterday. I was wondering if you'd be interested in brainstorming some ideas together for the pilot program. Absolutely. I think there's so much potential in trying out new methods, Sarah replied, enthusiasm illuminating her face. But we need to create a solid foundation, or it might fall flat before it starts. That thought echoed in Emily's mind. Before change could flourish, they needed a structure that encouraged experimentation while ensuring that it did not alienate those already hesitant about innovation. The two of them spent the lunch hour drafting a proposal, outlining the pilot program's framework, preliminary goals, and methods for collecting feedback. Energized by their collaboration, Emily felt the spark of her earlier passion reignite, yet as she walked away from lunch, a nagging sense of doubt began to bubble beneath her confidence. What if the proposal wasn't enough? What if Matthew, or others like him, found holes in it? Would the very act of proposing such a radical change expose her to criticism? The idea scared her more than she wanted to admit. Exposing her ambitions was vulnerable, facing rejection. Even more so, that afternoon, Emily found herself alone in her classroom, staring at the blank whiteboard. She grabbed a marker and began to outline her vision, pouring her anxieties into each word. Empowerment through teamwork, learning from failures, resilience, she wrote swiftly, punctuating her thoughts with determined strokes. By the time she stepped back to examine her work, she realized that this was more than a proposal, it was a declaration of intent. A sudden knock at the door interrupted her thoughts, jolting her back to reality. It was Matthew, stepping into the room with a hesitant expression that made her pulse quicken. "I was hoping we could talk," he said, glancing at the whiteboard. "About yesterday's discussion and maybe how to solidify this pilot idea." The weight of their conversation hung heavily, teetering on the edge of opportunity and challenge. Would this conversation foretell her resolve or shake the towers she had just begun to build? As she invited him in, Emily wondered whether she could juggle the hopes for change with an ongoing confrontation of her insecurities. Here was the moment that could pivot the course of her efforts. The stakes felt impossibly high. With every intention to speak and confront, she took a breath, feeling the weight of the entire future resting in the balance of their spoken words. How far was she willing to go? Would her actions define her leadership? This time, it wasn't just about courage. This was about confrontation, a test of will. That would challenge everything she had come to believe about herself as a leader and transform the boundaries determined by her fears. Emily felt the air in the room shift as Matthew closed the door behind him. His presence, once a source of anxiety, now felt oddly reassuring, almost like a silent challenge to prove herself. She met his gaze, trying to read his intent as he took a seat at her desk. "So, you want to solidify the pilot idea?" she began, forcing her voice to remain steady. Inside, her heart raced not just from the confrontation, but from the pressure to articulate her vision clearly. This was the moment that could validate all her efforts or expose her vulnerabilities. "Yeah," he replied, his demeanor still cautious. "I think there is something there, but we need to frame it in a way that resonates with the rest of the faculty. Some of them are skeptical about change, and I want to make sure we're addressing their concerns." Her chest tightened slightly. Agreeing to collaborate was a step forward, but the weight of stakeholder concerns bore down on her, amplifying her insecurities. Did she truly understand the worries of her colleagues? Or was she operating within an echo chamber of idealism, too disconnected from the reality of the teacher's experiences and skepticism? "What do you think their main issues are?" she asked, straining to keep the tone casual while her mind plagued her with doubt. Matthew leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "They're afraid. Afraid that their methods will be sidestepped, that they'll lose control over their classrooms. Change can be overwhelming, especially when they feel like they're not a part of the conversation. We have to show how this pilot could empower them, rather than replace them." Empowerment. The word echoed within her, prodding her deeper. Would teachers really feel empowered if they perceived her as an advocate for a new agenda rather than a genuine partner in the process? "Perhaps we should include their input in our proposal," she suggested tentatively. "We could host a forum for everyone to voice their thoughts before we finalize anything. It could be a way to engage them." Matthew's expression shifted to interest. "That's a solid idea. By getting buy-in early, we can lay the groundwork needed so they feel included rather than imposed on." Emily felt a small crack in her doubt begin to mend. Taking the initiative to facilitate a forum could shift the power dynamic. It wasn't just about her vision, it was about creating a communal investment in the outcome. As they began to outline logistics for the proposed forum, Emily could feel a sense of direction solidifying beneath the cautious tremors of her heart. She was adjusting her approach, focusing not just on her leadership, but on collaboration, a community of ideas instead of a hierarchy of decisions. Just then, the bell rang, tearing their attention back to the reality of the classroom. Students shuffled in, filling the space with laughter and the promise of potential. For a fleeting moment, she felt the warmth of hope, grounding her once more. "Let us keep this conversation going," Matthew said, standing to leave. "We can schedule another time to finalize the details." "Definitely," Emily replied, energized. As he exited, her resolve felt reinforced, but a shadow of doubt lingered. Would this newfound camaraderie sustain itself through the pressures to come? Would the forum fortify her initiative, or would it expose weaknesses she had yet to confront? That evening, as she prepared her plans for the discussions ahead, she recognized a pivotal crossroads forming before her. Leadership meant taking risks, but it also meant facing the consequences of those choices. Her heart pounded anew with all the possibilities unfolding, both daunting and exhilarating. Could she rally her colleagues to a common vision, or would her aspirations crumble under scrutiny? She could taste change tantalizingly close yet painfully out of reach, and the question gnawed at her: how far was she willing to go for what she believed in? What was she prepared to lose, and even more terrifying, what was she prepared to gain? As night fell, she pondered the depth of her undertaking. Realizing she now stood at a precipice beyond anything she had previously navigated. The next day held the potential to elevate or entangle her in unforeseen ways, and she needed to be ready. But was she harnessing her burgeoning confidence to catalyze change, or was she merely teetering on the edge of bravado? The weight of her decision hung in the air, poised to shift her reality in a moment of truth just waiting to unveil itself. The next morning, Emily stood in front of the mirror, running a hand through her hair as she mentally rehearsed her opening remarks for the forum. The fluorescent lights flickered above, causing her reflection to waver slightly, not unlike the nerves coursing through her. Today was a launching point, the beginning of a dialogue that could reshape her environment or entrench her insecurities further. As she gathered her papers, her mind swirled with questions. What if her colleagues reacted negatively? What if they dismissed her ideas outright, reinforcing the doubts that had been her unwelcome companions? Yet a more significant part of her began to wonder if she could surprise herself with the strength of her convictions. The sharp jingle of the school bell pulled Emily from her thoughts. The conference room was already buzzing with teachers trickling in, their chatter a blend of excitement and skepticism. She positioned herself at the front, her heart racing with anticipation. "Thank you all for being here this morning," she began, her voice edged with determination. "Today, we're going to discuss the pilot program I proposed and how we can tailor it to serve all of us better." As she articulated her vision, she noticed varying degrees of interest and dissent among the audience. Faces in the crowd wore expressions of curiosity, but skepticism loitered like a shadow, ready to pounce. One teacher, a longtime colleague named Sarah, interjected almost immediately. "Emily, it sounds great really. It does, but how can we trust that these changes won't just add more stress to our plates? We have enough to juggle as it is." Emily paused, considering the question. "I understand the concern. This isn't about overwhelming you but rather empowering us. If we integrate our expertise into the program's foundation, we can address our challenges together." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. She could sense the hesitations, but beneath them, the undercurrent of doubt began to quiver, the first signs of engagement. "Engagement is crucial," she continued, sensing the tide turning within her. "I propose we work collaboratively, so everyone feels heard. Let us gather your ideas and concerns. We can create a proposal that truly reflects our collective experience." As she spoke, something shifted within her. The tension that had coiled tightly in her chest began to release, replaced by a robust sense of purpose. Each bullet point she shared centered on their contributions, shifting the power dynamic she had worried about. With each sentence, Emily looked at her colleagues not as skeptics but as partners in her mission, a subtle but powerful transformation in her mindset. The discourse deepened, and as they broke into discussion groups, she felt a burgeoning confidence guiding her. Surrounded by her peers discussing their fears and hopes aloud, Emily realized how powerful this forum had become. It was no longer just a presentation of her vision, it morphed into a landscape for collaboration and shared aspirations, but amid the validation, a fear lingered at the edges of her consciousness. Was this shift merely a momentary reprieve from the scrutiny, or were her colleagues genuinely invested in the changes ahead? As the discussions wrapped up and the group shared insights, she saw a mix of excitement and caution reflected in their eyes. The next few weeks would stretch ahead. Her resolve would be tested, the pilot program scrutinized, and her new approach could either flourish or falter. As teachers exited the conference room, Emily captured a moment of triumph and trepidation. Was she on the verge of crafting a new reality for herself and her colleagues, Or was she simply delaying an inevitable confrontation with their concerns? The answers loomed, like the distant echoes of laughter resonating through the hallway. Today had ignited a spark, but could she sustain this momentum? The future stood before her, thick with uncertainty and possibility, and only time would reveal the depths of her courage, but even as she took a deep breath, a new apprehension flickered within her. Did she truly possess the resilience to navigate the potential backlash, or was she standing at the brink of exposing herself to the very resistance she feared? The days following the forum felt almost surreal to Emily. Each morning she woke with a mixture of eagerness and unease. The initial feedback from her colleagues had been cautiously optimistic, but as the week wore on, whispers of resistance began to surface. Adjusting to this new reality required a mental shift that tested her more than she had anticipated. In her classroom, she found herself reflecting on every interaction. Sarah's skeptical question echoed in her mind, not as a critique but as a challenge. How could she reassure her peers? How could she transform their doubt into shared purpose? She began to see her role as a bridge, connecting the discomfort of her colleagues with the possibilities her proposal offered. Determined to take action, Emily scheduled informal lunch gatherings, inviting teachers to share their thoughts on the pilot program. These meetings were not just about disseminating information, they allowed her to listen actively to concerns and aspirations. With every conversation, she felt her confidence swell. It was evident that her colleagues valued having a voice, and by providing a platform for dialogue, she was slowly dismantling the walls of hesitation that had once encased her. Despite this progress, private moments of self-doubt crawled in, sometimes overwhelming her resolve. Late at night, as she sifted through feedback and her own worries, she questioned if she was genuinely prepared to face the inevitable backlash. What if her efforts backfired? The very thought sent a chill of uncertainty through her, yet, it was in these quiet moments of vulnerability that she began to uncover hidden strengths. She devised a strategy to not only address concerns but also to frame the conversation around collaboration and shared benefits. Instead of shying away from criticism, she decided to embrace it, considering challenges as avenues for improvement. One afternoon, during a particularly candid lunch discussion, a younger teacher named Mark brought a fresh perspective. Emily, what if we created a feedback loop? Something that encourages ongoing input, so everyone feels they can contribute, not just in the initial phases. This idea sparked a realization in Emily. Here was a practical solution to foster continuous engagement and adapt to concerns along the way. In that moment, it dawned on her this wasn't just her program, it was a collective movement. She began to draft plans for a regular feedback system, complete with anonymous surveys and open discussion forums, which could empower everyone to voice opinions freely. As she meticulously outlined her proposal, Emily felt an exhilarating clarity wash over her. Each new idea sparked her enthusiasm further, solidifying a sense of ownership that now fully encompassed not only her vision but also the contributions of her colleagues. The next forum was set for a few weeks away, and Emily could almost feel the collective anticipation brewing. She understood now that genuine transformation didn't stem simply from one presentation or proposal. It thrived in the cultivation of an engaged community willing to lean into discomfort for the sake of growth. But just as she felt momentum building, an email from Sarah jolted her back into reality. It was a request for a one-on-one meeting, specifically to discuss concerns about the program and its potential ramifications. Emily's stomach churned. Was this an opportunity to reiterate her commitment, or did it signal an impending confrontation? As she stared at the screen, anxiety knotted within her, whispering doubts threatening to resurface. She took a deep breath, recalling the discussions that had ignited her journey. The time had come for her to face the question that lingered: was she ready to confront potential opposition head-on, or would she falter in the face of her own fears? The meeting loomed, and with it, the possibility of reaffirming her vision or unraveling the very fabric she had worked so hard to weave. Emily sat at her desk the day of the meeting, the late morning sun pouring through the window and warming the room. Today felt different, the air electric with possibilities and tensions alike. A week had passed since the forum, and she was brimming with anticipation. Feedback from her colleagues had been varied, with cautious optimism on one hand and lingering skepticism on the other. Yet, she couldn't ignore the fact that momentum was building an energy she'd never felt before. As Sarah entered the room, Emily's heart raced. "Thanks for meeting with me, Sarah," she said, keeping her tone light while masking the flutter of anxious nerves. "Of course, Emily. I've been thinking a lot about the pilot program since the forum. It's exciting, but I need to voice some concerns," Sarah said, her eyes searching. Every fiber of Emily's being urged her to counter with assurances, but deep down, she knew listening was the first step toward collaborative success. "I'm here to hear everything," she replied, focusing intently. Sarah shifted, uncertainty lacing her voice. "I worry the pilot might stretch everyone's capacities too thin. We're all balancing so much already. What if it feels like yet another obligation?" Emily listened, feeling the sting of vulnerability. This was what she had feared. Her proposals might add pressure rather than alleviate stress. As the thoughts tumbled through her mind, she took a moment to gather her thoughts. "What if we incorporate your feedback into the framework?" Emily offered. "How about creating a truly manageable pilot that only requires participants to embrace one small change at a time? We can frame it as a trial, gathering insights from it every few weeks to monitor the workload. By easing into it, we can support each other." Emily's proposition hung in the air, and she could see Sarah's eyes brighten. "I like that. Changing one thing allows us to assess its impact without overwhelming ourselves. A gradual implementation could actually make it more appealing." In that moment, a flicker of confidence surged within Emily. She realized the true essence of leadership wasn't merely in presenting ideas but in weaving them dynamically with the team's concerns. It wasn't her vision alone, it belonged to her and her colleagues. "Let's draft a plan together, ensuring everyone can weigh in with their ideas," Emily suggested, inspired by the newfound partnership. "We'll prioritize transparency and teamwork, so we can celebrate success together, however small it may be." As they collaborated, the door to the teacher's lounge opened and her fellow colleagues trickled in, unknowingly feeding the momentum of opportunity. Emily noticed Matthew gesturing toward her, summoning her attention. "Hey, could we brainstorm later about the next steps? I think we're starting to reach a critical mass." "Absolutely," Emily responded, delighted. As the discussions branched out, her mind buzzed with ideas, pieces of a collective puzzle forming a coherent picture. Over the course of the next few days, Emily witnessed a tangible shift. The pilot program meetings transformed into platforms of shared inspiration. Colleagues proactively suggested new ways to integrate materials, brainstormed curriculum projects, and it all crystallized around a shared vision rather than an imposition. Emily felt empowered as she stepped onto the staff room stage a few weeks later, ready to present the pilot program to the faculty again. The energy in the room was palpable. "Today, we're taking a bold step together," she declared, meeting curious eyes. "This pilot is about us. It's about collaboration and harnessing our individual strengths." With each point, she felt a solidarity she hadn't anticipated. How if they collectively took ownership, they could forge an educational path that sparked curiosity and ignited passion in their students. After wrapping up, faculty discussion ensued, enthusiasm radiating as those who were once skeptics became champions for change. In concluding that meeting, recognition of Emily's growth emerged subtly yet profoundly. She had transformed. From the insecure teacher battling self-doubt to a recognized leader capturing hearts and minds, fostering a genuine culture of collaboration. As the applause subsided, Sarah caught Emily's eye, beaming with appreciation. "You've really brought us together, Emily. Your ambition for change has sparked something incredible." Pride swelled in Emily's chest, but deeper was the realization that she had conquered not only institutional barriers but the insecurities that had once held her captive. "Thank you, Sarah. Together, we've built the groundwork for something special," she replied, her voice resonating with the courage she didn't know she possessed. Emily exited the staff room, the first rays of change now radiating within her colleagues. With sheer determination, she had transformed her fears into a resolute drive toward improvement, embodying the very legacy she sought to honor. As she stepped outside, the sunlight caught her face, filling her with warmth. Freedom swelled within her, a journey she had not just participated in but had led through her newly forged identity. Today was a defining moment, not just for her career but for what lay ahead, an educational transformation forged from collaboration, passion, and unyielding determination to confront and conquer the status quo. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to hear from you. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Every true fan of personal overcoming stories understands the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.